Hello and welcome to Talk of the Bay. I'm Rachel Anne Goodman, and this program is a special visit with a special person who happened to be visiting Santa Cruz County from Massachusetts, and we took advantage of the moment where we could talk and listen to some of his music. His name is Peter Blanchette. He has toured the concert halls of Europe and the United States. He has played on the streets of Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and parts of Norway for much of his career. And he plays a most unusual instrument that has a number of strings. Welcome, Peter, to Talk of the Bay.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Tell us about your instrument. It's called an arch guitar, and there are very few in the world.
Yeah, it's an instrument that I designed and had somebody make. So it's not, a traditional instrument in the sense that if you see this instrument, it's not that you have never seen them before. It's because there's only a few of them in the world. And it's basically a guitar that I had designed for me so that I could combine what I liked about the Renaissance and Baroque lute with the modern guitar. So it has 11 strings. It has, therefore, a bigger range than the guitar. And when I say it has 11 strings, a typical reaction to that is someone will say, well, why not play a 12-string? And, a 12-string guitar is a 6-string guitar with doubled strings, right? So each string that you play on a 12-string guitar is actually 2 strings next to each other. This has 11 individual strings and starts up higher than the 6-string guitar and goes all the way down to of course that sounded a little clunky right now because it's early in the morning.
And people can't see, but you have a capo on it that I think you had custom made because it's a custom instrument.
Yes, I had, yeah. And the range goes well down below the guitar as well. And that's actually a very practical thing. The reason why I have this instrument is because what I think of myself as an artist is basically as an arranger. That's what I really am. And first of all, I'm an arranger. And by that I mean I take I've always done this, taken existing repertoire from all sources, classical music, folk music, anything, and I'm trying to create versions of that music that work on the guitar, the way I play the guitar. So for me, I had this instrument made to expand the possibilities I have as an arranger, okay? And I did it when I was very young. I was 19 years old when I co-designed it with a brilliant instrument maker named Walter Stannell. He's in the Boston area.
And are you playing the original thing he made?
Yeah, I'm actually the instrument you see before you, which has a sort of, it's kind of like a Willie Nelson trigger model of an arch guitar in that it's old, it's beat up. It looks like it's on its last legs, but I have a feeling it isn't. And it just sounds so good and plays so well. I have other ones that look really nice, and there are, very, very pretty versions of arch guitars out there in the world. This one just sounds so good, I think, because like so often is the case with guitars, the more one person plays one, they find the sounds in that instrument. And the instrument appears then to grow into this amazing sounding instrument. But the truth is, it's the relationship between the player and the instrument, because I've spent so many thousands of hours finding out what sounds are in this guitar. So, So like I said, I think of myself as an arranger, and the tuning of the instrument allows me to do things that if I tried to arrange certain pieces of music on the 6-string guitar, I'd sort of come to a dead end. The Largo from the Harpsichord Concerto in F minor by Bach, this is a performance that it's really special to me because I was 23 years old, and I'm recording it in the Church of the Holy Spirit in Copenhagen, which was a beautiful Lutheran church, in front of which Peter Michelini, my duo partner, and I used to busk on the benches at night. And one of the people that came by listening to us was the organist in that church. And one night he sat and had a talk with us, just talking about music. And he said, "Have you guys ever recorded?" And I said, "No, we'd like to make a recording." And he said, "Well, you really should. Well, why don't you come in the church and see if you like how it sounds playing in the church?" So we went in the church and played in there, and it sounded amazing. And then a couple nights later, he rented a tape deck and a couple of microphones and came in, and we recorded. And we recorded my first CD. It's a long CD too, a lot of music. And what's amazing to me is it's all first takes. It's no editing at all. And my whole life since then, I've been trying to make a record that's as like, how does that happen? You know, like, and there are mistakes in it and stuff like that, but it, to me anyway, personally, and it just says, yeah, they don't matter. The music is so pure and it's beloved by many people. So this is J.S. Bach, Harpsichord Concerto, Largo.
Now, you were playing in like blues dives when you were underage, before this 19-year-old epiphany that you had. When did you finally realize that was not in the cards for you? Pretty early on, right? But you were playing in some pretty amazing, like funky blues bands and rock bands.
Yeah, I mean, I guess feels a little funny, like describing yourself as a prodigy, a child prodigy, something. But I suppose I played the guitar. I don't remember not playing the guitar. I played the guitar ever since I was, 4 or 5 years old. And I really took it seriously. And I learned by ear, and I learned by copying off of rock and roll records, okay? Everything from, blues to the Guess Who, to Jesus Christ Superstar, to Frank Sinatra records, to anything I heard. If the ice cream truck drove by my house, I'd want to know. I had that sort of obsessive ear that some people have, and I'd try to figure out how to play it on the guitar. I was born in 1960, so, you can imagine the kind of music. I also had cousins who played and sang like Everly Brothers tunes and Beatles. And I remember that music just really blew my mind to hear somebody do it live right in front of you, and like things like singing harmony and strumming the chords and right. And in the early 60s, it wasn't like the world is now. You couldn't just instantaneously watch every video ever made of whatever artist you choose. It was like once in a while on the TV at night on Sundays, there'd be music playing and you'd see, somebody really good. Oh, that's that song on the radio. And so I wanted to learn to play basically pop music, rock and roll. And as I got older, now we're talking like, by the time I was like 10, I could play, that would be 1970. And I remember I had Jimi Hendrix Smash Hits. I had that record, and I tried to learn those songs by ear. And then I got like, a $24 electric guitar, and played it through my parents' stereo, which sounded so bad. So much of my life when I was young was not being able to close the loop between what I saw in the music world and what I could make happen myself.
You know, the other day you were playing Something in the Way She Moves, that song, the Beatles song. Would you mind just playing a few licks of that just to show how far, like, that music's still in you in a big way?
Yeah, I had never played that song, and then I just sort of like heard it and was thinking like it's so beautiful, and now when I hear okay, so you take a piece of music like that, I'm inspired by how beautiful it is. I no longer want to imitate the way it's played on the record. I want to find out what's underneath it that I can play in my style. And I just loved how I think it was putting me on the spot, but here it goes. I think that it was something like and then and I love this part. And then, you get that. Anyway.
Lovely. Peter Blanchette, my guest, transposing and arranging a beautiful song in a way that we probably never heard it done. And that's kind of what you bring to the table, among other things, is this ability to hear music in a different way than it was originally intended and just make it your own on this instrument. So you quit somehow playing in these rock bands as a young person. What, you like 14 or 15 when you finally had it?
Yeah, when I was 16. Well, I tried playing, in bands with friends. I had one friend who was a really, really good musician, and we learned a lot of things together. His name's Peter Michelini, and he and I don't think he played the bass, and I don't think we could never find a drummer who could, like, I won't say keep up with us, because most of the drummers we played with only sped up all the time when they played. So they actually had no problem keeping up with us. They just went on ahead. And there was a lot of frustration in that, but we spent many, many afternoons, people talk about the 10,000 hours thing. I'm sure we spent 10,000 hours at his house, sitting on his bed with a record player and moving the needle back and playing something, and him saying, like, here's the bass line, and I'd be trying to figure out the lick. And so we'd learn music together. And we had bands, and, sometimes it was really good. People thought we were really good for our age, but like none of us wanted to sing, and that's what having a band is all about in that style of music. I just wanted to play the music. So did he. And so I always felt a little frustration with that part of making the music, although a lot of pleasure from learning and making music ourselves. And then when I was 16, I went to see I had a girlfriend who was a little older than me, and she was in college, and the college she went to, UMass Amherst, was having a concert with the English lutenist and guitarist Julian Bream. This would be 1976. And I remember her, I remember talking to her on the phone and her saying, there's this guitar player playing a concert here. And like the poster says he's like the greatest guitarist in the world. And, I'd never heard of him. And in 1970, I think, 75 or 76, that was possible, right? That someone could be called the greatest guitarist in the world, and you might be on the wrong side of a particular fence and you'd have never heard of them. Well, certainly a classical guitarist I never would have heard of. And so she said, I'll get us tickets. I can get us good tickets because I work at the Fine Arts Center. So she got us like front row seats or second row seats. And I remember like thinking, oh, this is great. I'm going to go see this guy in a couple months. So I went to the library, got a couple of his records, listened to music that was like, wow, this is really amazing music. I don't remember what records they were, but I remember my reaction being, this is so virtuosic. And so I was stunned by the quietness and at the same time, the stunning energy that came out of the playing. Okay, so then I went to see him with her, and I sat in the front row, and my life, it was literally just my life. There's like before that and after that. I mean, to the hour.
Wow.
When I left that hall, and I had put a lot of energy into my identity, as one does when you're young, as to like, well, I play guitar, I can play rock, I can play blues, so I guess I'm going to like play in bars, and maybe if I'm really good, I'll get in some band, and we'll be really good, and we'll have a good singer maybe, and someone will write some songs, and maybe we can make a record. So that's what I thought my life was going to be coming up. But then I went to this concert, it was like, that has nothing to do with this. You must learn everything you can about this way of making music. And there's nothing for me to grab onto. There really wasn't. You couldn't find a classical guitar teacher.
This was in Boston.
Yeah, well, yeah, I lived outside of Boston in a suburb, Beverly, Massachusetts. And so I had my Les Paul guitar, which was this this electric guitar I love so much. I slept with my guitar. My guitar was in my bed because the moment I'd wake up, I just want to hold it and play it. And I just immediately sold it, and my big amplifier that was like, the size of a refrigerator that was in my parents' living room that, every once in a while I would just plug into that thing and make the whole house rattle. And I took it down to the music store and said, I need a classical guitar. I'll trade this for it. And then I took the music program from the concert I went to, because this music store could also order you music, But I was like, do you have Benjamin Britten's Nocturnal for guitar? And it's like, that's like, 20th century repertoire that would be very esoteric, and it was very new then even. Of course, some little music store in Beverly. No, we have the Mel Bay guitar method over here, though. And but the guy said, oh, I see that publisher name. Yeah, I can get these. Leave me the list. And then I remember like trading my guitar in, which was a really good guitar and a really good amp. And I got a lot of money for it. And it still didn't cover how much a Martin classical guitar and probably like 15 or 20 pieces of music, or, the correct edition, how much that came to. I remember one thing, because Julian Bream, when he came, he played on the lute in the first half of the concert and the guitar in the second half. And he played music by John Dowland. I'd never heard of John Dowland. Okay? He played John Dowland. It absolutely floored me how amazing that music was, and how much music one person could make on one instrument.
Do you still know those pieces in your head?
Oh yeah. I've had lifelong relationships with those pieces, but the book for the music, like, so I need this piece by John Dowland. Well, you can't buy that piece. You have to buy the complete lute music of John Dowland, edited by Diana Poulton, and it's published by Faber and Faber of London, and it costs $105. And this is like 1976,
That's a lot of money for back then.
It was a lot of money.
For a young person. How old are you now in this story?
15, 16. Yeah. And, but I got it. And when and I don't know how to read music at this point. I don't know how to read music. So what I did was, and I also bought every record with that music on I could, and borrowed every record from the library. And then I basically went home and sat with headphones on and looked at the written music while I listened to the record. And to me, that was the beginning of like a quasi-spiritual path because, I'm sure it's a universal phenomenon, but when you have a beginner's mind about something, that term beginner's mind, right? So you're really open and you're willing to try and you're curious to actually have the mysterious part of the experience right there at your fingertips, which is the listening, and at the same time to have some sort of way into it, i.e. the written music in front of you. Like I had like the kind of tireless energy you only have when you're young.
I'm Rachel Anne Goodman, and you're tuned to K-Squid, your community radio station for the Monterey Bay Area. This is Talk of the Bay, and I am speaking with Peter Blanchette. He is an arch guitar player, and it's an instrument you may or may not have ever heard, but you're going to hear a little bit now, and we'll be talking more about his journey from the concert halls of Europe to the streets of Amsterdam and everything in between. As a prolific musician, he's got some 16 CDs out there, and there's more information on the web, of course. If you look at Bandcamp, Arch Guitar is the way to find that. Peter, thank you for being here on the show.
My pleasure.
So we were just going to hear a piece, a little excerpt from a piece of one of the early pieces you ever learned on the regular classical guitar, and then you transposed it to this new arch guitar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is John Dowland. This one's called Lady Rich's Galliard, and I'll just play some phrases from it so you can hear. I did originally play it on 6-string guitar, but I like it better like this.
That thing resonates for a long time after the last note is played. And I was going to ask you, there's frets all the way up to the sound hole. Do you play up there?
Well, yeah, that's because earlier guitars before the 20th century, when the Spanish guitar makers started making guitars in many different ways to be louder, so the fingerboard of my guitar is flush with the face of my guitar. Normally a regular guitar, when you think about it, the black part on the neck where the frets are, it runs up and it meets the body of the guitar, and then it continues on the face of the guitar, right? So there's actually a big piece of usually very heavy wood, like ebony, glued onto the face of the guitar. That's not the way instruments used to be made. They used to just glue the neck to the body, and the frets were level with the body. And so what I like about that is that it's maybe hard to understand, just listening, but that means the strings on my guitar are closer to the face of the instrument. And because they're so close to the face of the instrument, that's part of why it has that ring that you just talked about. Because although I can't hit them very hard, there's not a lot of room to do that. They're so close that their own ringing causes the soundboard to vibrate a little more than you could extrapolate it and think of a string bass. A string bass, the bridge is very high. It's like, I don't know what, 2 or 3 inches off the face of the instrument, right? And when you pluck the strings, they don't ring a long time, but you can pluck them very hard and get a lot of sound out of them. These, you can only pluck them very softly, but the other strings are all so close to the face that they're all ringing a little bit more.
Kind of like, it almost sounds like it's electrified, but it's not. And I'm wondering about the low strings, the bass strings on there. I watched as you're playing, and you don't use them all that often, or at least in that piece you didn't.
Right.
Chords were all happening on the upper strings, the higher notes. So every once in a while you'll pluck them as a bass note.
Yes, and also that depends. Okay, so part of what the fun of creating this guitar is I not only wanted to have a guitar that was a combination of the Renaissance lute and the modern guitar. The Renaissance lute had 6 or 7 strings, doubled, but 6 or 7. Okay, pretty close to the modern guitar, right? But the Baroque lute could have as many as 13 strings. So like if you play Bach, so anyway, the music I just played was Renaissance music. So I don't really need to use all the low strings in that music. Dowland didn't put them there. Although I did play the 7th string, that's a low D, which is a beautiful sound, But like if I'm playing Bach, I might be playing the low basses. Like something like... And then when you get to a phrase that's in this key, you have that low bass note, And you might have this note down here. That's the lowest note there. This note on my instrument is the second lowest string on a bass. Okay, so if you have a stand-up bass or an electric bass, the second lowest string is an A, and that's what this is. And you can get a beautiful sonority of A minor because you have that low bass note down there. So
I want to get to when you ended up in Europe, because a lot of this is where the music came from, and you were going back to the source. What was that like to go from the United States completely out of the country and share this music in the places where it was originated?
Yeah, that happened because, my family's background is not, I didn't grow up in a family of traveling artists. I grew up in a very working class Boston area family. I was the second. My sister was the first person to go to college. And the going to Europe really came from everything that is good that's happened to me has happened for a practical reason. And the practical reason was the way I supported myself while going to Boston Conservatory, which after my, spiritual moment, deciding I wanted to, play classical music, forward a year and a half, and now instead of playing in bars or whatever like that, I'm trying to get into a conservatory and study composition, actually, not studying the guitar. I didn't think I could find anybody who taught the guitar. I didn't think that there was anybody really that I could find that could really teach me to play the guitar like Julian Bream. Anyway, when I went to school there to support myself, I started busking, and I started busking because it's really funny. Of all people, the guitar teacher at the conservatory, Walter Stanel, I came in for a lesson with him one Saturday. And when I came there, I was complaining to him bitterly about my job that I had. My job was that I worked at the Parker Brothers Game Factory in Salem, Massachusetts, where I folded Monopoly boards for 8 hours a day, or I put hotels and little trinkets or stacks of Monopoly cash into the Monopoly game sets as they went by on a conveyor belt. That was my job.
Here you are playing with funny money, right? Fake money, and you're thinking, I'm only earning 4 of these an hour.
Oh yeah,
or less.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that work is horrendous, mind-numbing work. And I would get to go once a week to my lesson for guitar. For even though I wasn't a guitar major, I was studying composition. My instrument was guitar, so I had this teacher, Walter Stanel. And Walter, one day I came in, you poor guy. I had lessons with him at his apartment, and he's like making me a cup of tea and saying, you spent the last, 8 hours folding Monopoly boards. It must be killing you. And he was almost kind of teasing me. And he said, it's funny because you play really well. And, you play really pretty well. And I heard this guy playing Bach on the cello up in Harvard Square. And I swear in his case, he had I think he had $8-10. And I did that lesson with him that day. And then after I was done, I walked to Harvard Square and I watched the street musicians. The cellist wasn't there, but another guy was there. I think he was like a Appalachian dulcimer player, and he was playing. He was pretty good, but nothing really special. But I saw that he had money in his case. And then I started making it a point of it to go and watch. And pretty soon I watched the cellist sitting in front of the Harvard Coupe playing the same kind of pieces that I'm trying to learn now on the guitar. And, people are throwing money in there. And I'm thinking, I can do this. So I went out, really, this is all within a couple of weeks, got an amplifier, a little pig nose amplifier, terrible, terrible sounding amplifiers that they had back then, but it ran on batteries. And you stuck something that was the size of a quarter on the face of your guitar with putty. And so at least it could be amplified. And here's the interesting thing. I didn't go to the Harvard Coupe to play the first time because I thought maybe I'm not ready for the big time yet. I thought you really better have your act together before you, as if this guy had his quote act together anymore.
There's no audition for street musicians, not in that era.
Yeah. And nor should there be, in my opinion,
That's the ultimate democratic performance space.
Yes,
public
it is.
Spaces.
Yes, it is. As much as it can gall you when you're a good musician and some bum is out there playing lousy, they're
Amplified.
terrible, and by bum, I don't even mean someone without money. I mean a bad musician. But anyway, so I went instead to MIT. This is a funny thing about Cambridge, Massachusetts in the 1970s. Went to MIT. MIT has this amazing lobby when you walk up the steps into the iconic building. It looks like a government building. It's so classical. And it has this high ceilinged lobby. And it's always just got a million people going and coming, walking around different ways. And it had this big sort of round bench area that you could sit on. And I just walked in there and I just started playing. Partly because, remember, I wasn't an inexperienced musician. I played in front of people plenty. And I also knew that my amplified guitar in this space would probably sound really cool because it was marble and it had reverb, And so I I sat down, faced the pig nose amp straight up in the air and started playing. And I started playing I probably knew like 2.5 pieces and really couldn't play any of them really expressively and freely yet, but I could play them, and I play them, and immediately people start dropping quarters into my case and smiling at me. And, this is at MIT, really, smart looking people walking by and nodding, very pleasant, saying thank you, saying, just all this positivity, right? And so I did it for a while. I probably did it for hours. I don't remember, but I did it for a while. And at the end, I look in my case and I have what amounts to like a day and a half of wages at Parker Brothers Game Factory. And I remember I packed it up. I put it in this bag I had. And then I went to Harvard Square now.
The big time.
I went to Broadway, right? Yeah. I went to Harvard Square and I had myself a little lunch, and I was sort of enjoying, like thinking what my next move was. And then the cello player guy wasn't there in front of the coop. So I sat up there and I played there and I made some more money. And it's not about making, well, it is partly about making money because I needed to make money to pay my rent. And I needed to pay for the conservatory, all $1,400 a year.
That's changed, yeah.
Yeah, that's changed. And my $200 apartment that I shared with a friend in Boston. Anyway, went to Harvard Square, and I wasn't living in Boston yet. I was still living in Salem and taking the train in for the lessons. But as soon as I had that experience, I went home and told my parents, I'm quitting my job tomorrow. I'm going to do this. And my mom was literally like crying.
Oh no!
Oh, heartbroken. Like it's dangerous down there. What are you doing down there? It'll be, every bad thing you could think that she could say.
Not worried about begging. Your arm getting cut off during the assembly line.
Right. No, that's true. No, but whereas you've got a good job, and which she had every reason to have that point of view. But my dad had a little bit different point of view. My dad just saw the money. I just said, look, I made this today, and counting it up. My dad kind of got off on, like, I'm sitting there at the kitchen table going, 21, 21.50, 22, wait a minute, 46.80. And he's like, how much you got there? In the end, maybe it was like $68. And he's like, you can't argue with that, And he's like, and you're going to go do it tomorrow? I said, I'm going to do it every day.
And Peter Blanchette is still doing it, folks, after all these decades. I just want to say that, you never know where life is going to lead you. And in your case, that one experience led to an entire lifetime of playing in those environments all over Europe. We're going to take a tiny break and then come back and listen to one of your recordings that you've made, among which you have many. So maybe you'd like to cue that up for us before we take our break. This is Talk of the Bay. I'm Rachel Anne Goodman, and we're speaking with Peter Blanchette, an arch guitar player, street musician, and recording artist who's got many wonderful recordings available on Bandcamp. What would you like us to hear?
One of my many loves, and, as I said, I think of myself as an arranger from back in those days, was when I discovered Italian film. One of the reasons why I fell in love with the films of Fellini, Morricone, was the music was so amazing. Music of Nino Rota and Ennio Morricone. And so I made an album called Cinema Italiano, which has some of my favorite film score themes and moments from film cues arranged for my instrument. And I'd like you to listen to something called Carlotta's Galop, which is from Fellini's 8½. It's really an amazing piece of music.
You're tuned to Talk of the Bay on K-Squid, community radio for the Monterey Bay Area. I'm Rachel Anne Goodman, and my guest in the program today is Peter Blanchette. He's playing his arch guitar and sharing some of the wisdom of surviving as an artist in this world. He's been surviving quite successfully and in a numerous array of methods of staying fiscally solvent. He's able to live a very middle-class life with a house in Massachusetts and have a very rich artistic life. So he's going to share a little bit more about how he's patched together a number of different ways of being a musician in this world that has enabled him to continue to do that well up into his, I wouldn't say later years, but middle years, to say.
You said surviving as an artist, and to me, one thing that happens when you're 64 years old is you can look at your life and you can look at the times you've gone through. And I've known a lot of people in my life who are very, whatever you want to call it, gifted artists, or at least very involved artists, promising artists. And for so many different reasons, many of them, they lose steam, they lose focus, and it's not. So I come to the conclusion that it's not easy to keep making good art and to keep developing all through your life. Just probably like anything else. Probably like it's hard to keep growing as you grow older. But without really having consciously thought about it, I think I've been lucky because I've always been very curious about musical experiences. So I've sort of re-experienced that sort of spiritual moment when I saw Bream play, and it was like, oh, but my identity is as a young, playing rock and roll dude. It's like, I can't, this English guy in a tuxedo with this dry wit and, classical music. This couldn't be what I'm into, could it? But the ravishing effect of the sound of the music made all of those other circumstances irrelevant. And so I've had something like that experience over and over again. Street playing was one of them right away, because I saw this music in this high elevated thing, a concert hall, right? Would I have thought that my audience was people waiting in line with a to-go cup of coffee at 5 a.m. on a freezing cold day in December in the subway station? Would that be an audience that would want to take in, like, Bach, the best I could do? Well, it turns out very much so. So I've had this cyclical experience of, like, I'm curious about the phenomenon, and it really feeds me and lights me up and gives me energy. And then I sort of desperately find a way to obsess with it. And I think obsession is super important to survive as an artist. You've got to care more about what you love than makes sense.
You've been on Prairie Home Companion. Mm-hmm. You've been licensed to Sex and the City, is that right?
Yeah, I've done
what
music
episode,
for
by the
television.
way?
On the first season, I think like the 3rd and the 12th, if the 12th is the last. Yeah, it's just in the background, but it's again, like surviving as an artist. It was, you just do everything you can, and you do it. Hopefully you only do things that really do draw some curiosity out in you.
You won the Tiny Town contest for Prairie Home Companion. They used to run this contest, Towns Under 2000. Yeah. And you were the winner, and that's hard, right? There were 5 other contestants, and you got picked, and you got to come back.
Yeah, that was quite an experience, and I got to play in town hall, and then that's the way you get like record companies to to call you, and I went through that whole thing, and it's like it's funny. It's almost like you never. My experience is you don't really find what you need by looking for it. It finds you by you looking for almost anything, as long as you're really looking with the right kind of curiosity. And that, I admit, is a statement of faith. That is faith. There's no rationale to say it couldn't just go the other way. And I think it does go the other way too sometimes. And for me, I've been so disappointed different times in my life about things I've tried to do, because it's really hard. It's hard to find people to play with that you can really match with and play well, especially when you have a vision of, you mentioned that, like when I just was showing you, like, oh, I heard that song something, and here's kind of the way I hear it. Well, other people don't hear it that way. So you start from a place like that might be exciting to someone, but someone else might say, well, I don't get it.
And one of the things that drew you out here for this visit was to play with my husband, Steve Coulter, where he's playing the harp and you're playing the arch guitar.
Yes.
And I've been really enjoying your arrangements of Irish tunes. You're thinking about maybe studying in Ireland. There's something about Irish music that attracts you. Talk about that collaboration that may or may not end up, with a performance possibly in Ireland.
Oh, well, first of all, I've known your husband, Steve, for a really long time, because, a big chapter in my life was when I found out that there was a sort of promised land of busking over in Europe. I had this romantic notion of what it was like to live in Europe, so I went as soon as I could. I took a standby flight to Europe. Years later, I'm traveling around, and I met this guy who's a wonderful, I guess you could say, harper, if you can use the really honorific term of harper, Steve Coulter, who played with another guy who became a good friend, Harris Moore, on the hammer dulcimer, and we crossed paths now and then as buskers in Northern Europe, and we sort of. We shared notes, and we had a sort of, I would call it, like, the best sense of the word, like friendly rivalry, and a lot of shop talk and a lot of talk about where is it fun to play, where do you do well, where can there be problems with police. And another thing we had in common is that we both played music that, unlike a lot of buskers, we both played music that was more on the soft side, So that has a lot of implications. That means some places might be good to play that no one else would know about, and there'd be things you want to watch out for. Anyway, we became friends, and we've known each other for many years, off and on. And also Steve's brother Bill, who's an amazing guitar player, who I also met when he would be over visiting Steve in Europe and playing some. Now, they're from the West Coast. I'm from the East Coast. When we're home, you know what I mean? That's where home is. So we didn't get together here ever, really, back in the States. But we'd see each other over there. And we actually thought about playing some music together before years ago. But they had a pretty tight duo, Harris and Steve, and they were always going to be traveling somewhere. And I played duos with this other guitarist, Peter McElhaney. So it never happened, but I always wanted to play with arch guitar and harp. And so I remember thinking, like, there's a lot of things about the harp that I don't know, and that piques my curiosity about what you can do with it. Here's an interesting thing. The harp, because it's plucked strings, and nylon plucked strings, and my instrument plucked strings, nylon plucked strings. So they must sound the same, right? Well, no, of course they don't. They sound really different. And it's the ways in which they sound different that I think make a combination between the two that's really appealing.
Would you mind playing a little just any of the Celtic pieces you're working on, just to hear how this guitar sounds doing one of the
Yeah, sure. Something like that.
What's the name of that piece?
I believe that's called Brua na Caragabana, which that might be the worst pronunciation. I apologize for it. I believe it means the edge of the white rock. It's a tune that I learned last year from a mutual acquaintance. A musician Steve has worked with over in Ireland, who he connected me with, and she and I played a concert. Her name's Niamh Varian Barry. She's an amazing violist, violinist, singer, writer herself. And so she kindly agreed to play a little concert with me. And I said, bring a tune or two that I could work on to play with you. And she brought that tune, and it's just it's really beautiful. So this recording is this is a good example of a type of recording that I really enjoyed making, where like how Prince makes records, pop records, where he plays all the instruments himself, right? Okay. So I sort of like to do that with classical music and arrangements that I make. Although it's also even more fun if you have another person come in and play an instrument you can't play on them. And that's what this is an example of. I did some pieces based on the concept of, like, what if a troupe of Elizabethan musicians and Irish traditional musicians got together and played each other's music as an entertainment for each other. And so this piece, which is, it's based on a piece from a book of Scottish dance music, an Irish traditional tune, and a consort piece by John Dowland. It's the Lady Hamilton Dalrymple and the Man at Large and the Lord Chamberlain's Galliard. Now, the interesting thing about Dowland's piece, the Lord Chamberlain's Galliard, it's a piece that he wrote as a sort of stunt piece where, like, two people can play on the same lute at the same time. So you put your arms around the other person and play. Yeah, but it's an amazingly beautiful piece of music too. It's really, really kind of fun. Anyway, so my friend Kenny Butler, a violinist back in the States, back in Massachusetts, he and I would write these arrangements and have him be the fiddler or fiddlers on them. And I played my arch guitar, I played other acoustic guitars, I played a cittern, I played all kinds of instruments that I restrung to sort of sound the way I wanted to give this effect. And it's something I really enjoy doing. I did a record of music from Scotland, Ireland, and Elizabethan
So we're just about out of time. I thought we'd go out with a tune and maybe have you introduce it. What would you like us to hear as a good example of what you do?
I think I'd actually at this point like to listen to something a little bit far out.
All right.
Because I've done a lot of arrangements of stuff that I never thought would be possible, and it's music that really means a lot to me. So I'm going to ask you to play my arrangement of the opening movement of Shostakovich's 10th String Quartet that I arranged for a couple of arch guitars. It's real different than the music I just played, but to me it's also music that is really, really important to me, and I love it.
Speaking with Peter Blanchette, arch guitar player and a wonderful musician, visiting Santa Cruz County on a journey of musical exploration. Thank you so much, Peter, for being here with us on Talk of the Bay. Great to have you. I'm Rachel Anne Goodman, and this is Talk of the Bay on K-Squid 90.7 FM, 89.7 FM, and 89.5 FM.